have a wide variety of experiences and places. I made a map for you so you could kind of picture in your mind where they're talking about tonight. I know I'm very visual like that. I want to know, where are these places that people have been? But we're just going to kind of do some introductions, who's up here, and then I've formulated some questions, but then we'll make sure, Chad, do you want to give me like 10 minutes left? Signal, and then we'll open it up for your questions that you have either specifically for someone in that region or just in general. So thank you guys for being here. Really appreciate it. I'll just go down the row. We have Chelsea Kiley. Chelsea is an SAU grad. She and her husband Sean lived in Uganda for 2 years and taught at an international school. They've been back a year now. And so Chelsea was an education major and now teaches 4th grade at Paragon, just in Jackson. So we're excited to have her back in the area, but it's really great to follow her blog and watch you. Okay, yeah. Then we have Professor Jonathan Brink. Maybe some of you have had him in class. Jonathan is representing kind of the UK. Went to school in Scotland for his undergrad.
Postgrad.
Postgrad, yes, and Canada for undergrad. Yeah. And you know that he works here now. So, Gavin McGraw. Gavin and his wife Kelly were most recently living in Lowell Hall, but now they have
It's a whole different culture.
Yes. Gavin and Kelly lived in China and taught English for 3 years.
Yep.
And we're part of kind of recruiting teachers a little bit too for
Yep.
their program as well. And now Gavin works at Magnesium Molding Company in Jackson, and he and his wife co-own the Jazzercise in Spring Arbor.
You should come check it out.
You should. Next we have Professor Katie Weekland. Katie lived in Tajikistan working with a nonprofit. She's most recently moved to Spring Arbor. This is her 2nd semester teaching biology here at Spring Arbor. So, do you have? Oh, okay. Does this help if I speak? You in the back, is that helpful? Okay, great. We'll keep these. And then at the end we have Jeanette and Joel Miller. And would you guys want to talk a little bit about where you were and what you were doing?
And part of that's my fault because I am the worst person about following up on communication and doing all that kind of stuff and being on time. So we lived in Mexico City for 4.5 years, and we've been doing medical missions. We did 4 years in Burundi, Africa, both in this capital city and then upcountry in an upcountry hospital that was far away from anything. So that's pretty much us. And now we're here in Spring Arbor. We have 4 kids who we've dragged all around the world with us.
Great, thank you. So I'm just going to start off with this most general question of, and it's more personal too, but when did you all start thinking about living overseas? And then how soon after that first thought did you move? So this is one that I'd love for all to answer.
So when I was a teenager, my church and youth group did a lot of different mission trips. And so I was probably about 15 or 16 years old and did a 3-week mission trip to India and volunteered and worked in schools. And I truly believe I felt at that age that God was calling me abroad. I had no idea where or doing what, but I just really had a passion for working with underdeveloped countries and just wanted to teach and go abroad. So since I was 15 or 16, I would say I just knew that somewhere in my future that I would teach abroad. So then I ended up going, probably I was 23, so like 7 or 8 years later.
Okay, so let's see, back in 1999, I almost came here actually. I had some scholarships and things lined up, but it just ended up being a little too expensive for me, so I ended up going to Canada for my undergrad. And that was kind of an impulse decision, and I'll never know if that was the right decision or not, but here I am now. So then let's see, after I graduated from my undergrad degree, I went to Osaka, Japan to teach English for a year, and that was another impulse thing that I didn't put too much thought into. There was a recruiter that made a very good pitch, and it sounded like a good way to earn a lot of money very quickly, so for reasons much less noble than while you're going overseas. But so that was that. So I think I put maybe a month of thought into it, and then went over to Japan for about a year. And then from there, it was Scotland, and that was yet another impulsive thing. So it was, I was very presumptuous, thinking I can apply to all these elite schools in England, and somehow I actually got into St. Andrews University, and I had no idea how or why, but so I was really happy to just to go there for a year. So did I stray from everything? Okay, so
That's cool. Well, I always thought that I'd like to travel. Then I was introduced to China via the cross-cultural program here. And after going, really felt the heart for it. I said, oh man, I just want to go back. That was awesome. 3 weeks, that was amazing. And it took about a year to get back because I had to find an organization to go with. And it was constantly working and then trying to look and find the right organization, something that made sense for what I was looking for.
I started thinking about going overseas when I was in graduate school. I had attended the Urbana Missions Conference, which is a huge student missions conference. And I thought, oh, maybe I could do that someday, use my expertise overseas. Then I was still working on my doctorate, so I had to finish that. And then you have student loans to pay off, so I had to work. And then just praying and asking God to lead me. It was probably like 12 or 15 years before I actually got to go and live overseas. I did some short-term trips, but living overseas took a while.
I was 14, the first time I really felt like God was leading us me that way. And I'll tell you, the first time we did we did a short term, the first time we did a longer term, 9 weeks, was our first year of marriage in Kenya. And I was crash and burn, and I said, done. Never living overseas again. But
that wasn't the end of the story.
that wasn't the end of the story.
It's a common story, isn't it? When you have an early experience as a teenager or as a young person, somebody captures your attention, and that's what happened for sure for me. Just people that my parents brought into our home who captured my attention, and that set me on this trajectory to say, where in the world might God use us and use me?
And you were how old when we moved to Mexico? 32.
When you go through medical school, some of you who will do professional school, you kind of have to keep kicking that can down the road, but you find little windows through your training where you can sometimes still go and do a month or do a couple of weeks, so that's what we did.
All right, so thinking about the place that you lived or places, were there any roadblocks that you came across when they're applying for those things or trying to find the right organization? And how did you work through those roadblocks? This could be
Most of my, I don't know if you can hear me. Okay. So most of my situation was for that year when I was looking, it was also a lot of personal stuff, I was dating my wife at the time and, trying to decide, well, if I go, will I get married before, or what's going to happen if there's, what are the different scenarios, so it was a lot of life decisions because it's right out of college. It's like, where do I want to go with my life? What do I want to do? Lord, show me the way. And just a process of trying to seek His will, and so it was kind of a robot just of all these personal things, and then also financial. You know, it's like, am I going to choose an organization that I have to raise money for? How long is that going to take? Versus, can I get a place that will pay me to work there? So that was also a big factor.
Yeah, I think because we went with missions, you have to raise money first. We met with leadership and we talked about what would be a good fit for us, what would be a good fit for the family, what kind of expectations do they have on me, on the kids, on him. Can we send our kids to international school? Can we, raise, cost all the funds that you raise to send your kids to bilingual schools? All those things are factors, which obviously are not where you are right now, but are obstacles in our process of the journey because of what we were doing, taking time off. I mean, we left work and did that kind of stuff. You have to, if you're moving, you sell your house, you sell your possessions, you have to figure out a place to put your stuff. Those things were they're huge and they're stressful and they're a major part of the process. So, thoughts on that?
So our biggest roadblock, I looked probably for a year and a half after graduating college. And the biggest roadblock I would say for my husband and I, we're both Spring Arbor grads. And so we both graduated with lots and lots of debt. And so we both we prayed about it and just really felt like there's no way we can go over there if we don't have a salary. Like we just can't make that work because we're talking huge amount of debt. So for an entire year, I signed up for these websites and kept searching, and I would get these emails of these schools that sounded wonderful, and then in the bottom with the small print would say, does not pay, must raise support, something like that, does not house teachers, that kind of thing. So for us personally, we just kind of felt like, okay, like if this is where God wants us, and this is how we truly believe that we need to go with getting a salary so that we can still pay our loans, that God will make it happen. And so after about a year and a half, we found this international school and it was salaried. And so even the 2.5 years we were in Uganda, we were still able to pay on our loans.
I'd say the biggest roadblock for me is I was in what we call creative access mission. So you can't get a missionary visa or a religious worker visa. You have to have an expertise and a degree. My degree didn't fit very well because I'm a wildlife biologist, and Tajikistan didn't have a lot of need for that. So we had to think through how could I fit into this organization, what could I bring to the table, were things that they needed to complete the work they were doing. So I think the biggest thing was just trying to come up with something that would be legitimate for applying for visas.
All right. I'd love to hear some of your first experiences of adjusting to living in a new culture, where you lived, or maybe some short stories of how that adjustment went for you.
I blew up a stove my first morning there. So we got in about 2 o'clock in the morning and we're just like, here's your apartment, welcome. And so I woke up and the stove, you guys will all laugh. It was like a European stove, so it had a cover, but it was a glass cover. And of course I didn't think anything of it, so I turned on the stove. Well, probably like 10 minutes later, the entire glass top just shattered everywhere, and there's glass in me, and there's glass in my husband, and there's glass all over our kitchen, and I just stood there and just started crying, and I was like, what did I do? And Sean's like, I don't think you were supposed to leave that down. I think you were supposed to lift it up before turning it on. So that was just a really random story. But that was my very first morning of trying to cook in my new house and completely blowing up the stove. So then later that evening when I had a meeting with our principal, I very awkwardly had to say, I know I just met you when you picked me up from the airport a few hours ago, but I just blew up the stove in the brand new apartment that you gave me. So.
Well, and feeling like an idiot is part of, it's every day. You can't shop, you can't cook things, thankfully, it depends on your support system. If you go into a place without a support system, there's somebody on the ground that has some idea of what's going on, oh my word. I mean, just everything from government paperwork, because everything is a process, and knowing where to go and how to stand in the lines and how to fill out papers, having a child in a foreign country and changing a birth certificate. I mean, everything. I sobbed in so many offices of just like, I've been here 7 times and you told me to bring these papers, we brought them, and now you're saying you want different papers. And why are we not getting this? We speak Spanish. But it was a constant. It was finally like, well, we don't really know what. Can we just have him adopt the baby, because we don't know what to do with your different. Because here we have different. The names work differently than your names, and we don't really. And John's like, I'm not going to adopt my own child. We will figure out the birth certificate. But I mean, everything is a major thing, and so the stress level is so high at all times. And if you do anything like have any kind of difficulty in addition to that, or any kind of trauma as small, you can completely lose it. I mean, I was the worst Mexican woman ever. I mean, my children went around with bare feet, which meant sickness was entering through their feet. I was a very bad mother. I sat down on a curb. If you sit down on a curb, it makes you infertile, which I had 4 kids. I don't know why that was a problem for them, but that was like, women don't do that. You shouldn't be sitting on a curb, because all these things, there's always something that you are doing wrong, and no one's telling you, because that would be rude, right? So they're just letting you, and they don't know why you're doing it, and it's just this conversation that is always, like, you just are always learning all the things that you're doing wrong. And so the stress level of just being able, like, I can't cook, like, just going to the store, I just wanted to buy salsa. Salsa. And salsa means sauce in Spanish. So I'm going to these Mexican stores going, ¿Dónde está la salsa? And they're going, ¿Qué salsa? What salsa? Salsa, the salsa that we call salsa in the United States. And they're just like, she's saying saucy sauce. And we don't know what that is. And I asked 10 people, and everybody's just looking at me like I'm crazy. Like, I can't even, like, I just want to find this, and you can't. Everything is so much more exhausting. It's amazing, but it's exhausting. Go ahead. I mean, I love international living, but it's exhausting.
And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes the people at the grocery store would just stand there and laugh at you too.
Oh, yeah.
So then you're
Watch
like,
you do it, yeah.
stop laughing! Like, I just do not understand. So then you get laughed at as well.
I think for me, I was living in a predominantly Muslim country, and they have really strict rules on gender roles. So, like, women, you're really not supposed to talk to men or make eye contact with men. And so if you're walking down the street and a guy stops to talk to you, you're like, what do I do? It's like that stress level again. Am I gonna ruin my reputation just by talking to this man? Like, there's all these concerns about how men and women interact, and we don't know those nuances and rules, and so you do make a lot of mistakes. Another thing was transportation. One of the main ways they get around is just flag down a car and like get in. It's kind of like hitchhiking, and I was like, you want me to do what? Like, you want me to get in a car with a strange man when I don't speak the language and just let him take me anywhere? You want me to do what? And they're like, yeah, we do it all the time, and you're like freaking out because we would never do that in America, but there it's normal. So there's a lot of situations like that where, yeah, you're stressed out.
So I remember that first experience when you're all jet lagged because we flew. It's a 14-hour flight, and then you drive in, and we were outside of a major city, so we had to drive like an hour and a half into our city, and it's a city of 2 million people, which is a small city in China because they have 1 billion more people than us. And we were probably one of, I want to say, like 15 foreigners in the city, like that are at least with white skin. They all say we all have blonde hair, and I had no hair, but blue eyes, but a tall nose. So you walk around and everyone just stares at you. Oh, the Uyghur. Oh, there's a foreigner. For some of these people, the first foreigner they've seen because they're coming from the countryside, and they're like, I've only seen foreigners on TV. And just that first day, I remember walking out, and Kelly and I are so nervous. It's like, okay, well, I guess we should explore and like try to find our way around the city. Start to learn it. And remember, we walked down through an alley and then out, and we found a park, and just so proud of ourselves. Like, oh, look at how far we made it. First day. you know, comes to find out, you know, it was like a quarter mile away. Like we just walked like just this little bit. You know, we ended up walking miles every day out to the grocery store and stuff. So it was it's just funny, those little steps, those little wins you get when you first step out. Like, oh, look how far, look how great we made it. But then, yeah, everything else is hard. You're like, oh my goodness, what am I gonna do? How do I, you know, you look. I go to the food carts because at the moment we're gonna cook for ourselves. So it's like, you know, all sorts of meat and junk, and they're just deep fried, or there's, you know, I have no idea what I want, you know. And it was exciting and horrifying all at the same time. So.
So, gosh, I wasn't trying to answer that, but when you mentioned blowing up the stove, yeah, that was very close to one of my first experiences in Scotland. So, little tip, you do have to buy like a power converter for any electronic equipment, and which, like I don't know where I put it, or just wasn't thinking, so I plugged in my printer, which I was going to use to print out all of my assignments for grad school, and the printer exploded, there was smoke, and thankfully, the library allowed us to print for a nominal fee, so I was able to use that, but I had to throw out a very nice and expensive printer that I had bought for that. It was awesome. It was really compact, and I was excited to use that. But then let's see. I'm trying to think. My first day or two in Japan was completely different. It was Osaka, Japan is this. It's a very touristy city, and there's a lot of noise. So I think it's like living in a video arcade. There's just continual blaring advertisements and lights everywhere. And to be honest, I thrived on that. I thought it was great. I don't think I could go back to that now, but I just got a buzz from the excitement of just the chaos of Osaka.
In Inverse, what were some of the first experiences that you really felt like enjoyment, or some of those beautiful moments of, maybe, I'm so glad I'm here.
The first moments?
Or a moment.
You know, it's kind of hard because what happens is it becomes an accumulation, and you start to integrate yourself into the community there, and you get to know people, and you're working. So when you really realize and you start to do that, and when you look in retrospect, you're like, wow, like now I feel like I'm like, that's awesome, like, you know, like, wow, God has moved in this way, and look at this community that He's helped us develop, and we've been able to reach into the lives of all these people, and they've influenced us just as much. And I know for Kelly and I, when we think back on our time in China, it's a contrast of Thanksgivings between our first year and our third year. So when I look at my first year of Thanksgiving, where I'm looking at, we're literally sitting in KFC because that's the only like bird we could find, and Kelly's eating a chicken wing and crying because it's Thanksgiving and she's, you know, not with family for the first time and ever, and this is all we could get, you know. It wasn't, and we didn't know very many people. To our third year, where we had an apartment full of Chinese and expats, and we actually got a turkey shipped in, and we had one of the restaurants cook it for us. It was this time of fellowship and togetherness. I mean, we had like 30 people in this apartment, but it was awesome because it was like, wow, we really have this community. We've been able to reach all these people, develop these awesome friendships that are gonna last a lifetime. And you know, it's one of those things that just takes time, and you don't realize it until you like look back.
I would tag on to what Gavin said, that it's really about the relational aspects. That's when you start to say, or that's when you say, this has really been a good thing. And for those of you coming out of living in a dorm, or you know, living in a house or whatever, you really are connected to this group of people. And so most of you aren't going to go overseas to, I mean, yeah, you want to see the Eiffel Tower, or you want to, you know, see the Taj Mahal or something, but that only lasts for a day. Really, the thing that sustains you overseas are these relationships. And I know for us, when we finally had a Mexican friend, a family that befriended us, I think took pity on us and said, man, you guys are not going to make it. We are going to help you out. We're going to take you under our wing. And they helped us get our kids to school, to the Mexican preschool, and he took me around to hardware stores and things that would have taken forever. So once you have that same culture, their culture, once you have that friend or the few friends like that, that's, I think, when you start to say, man, this is a really good thing.
I would say for me, I went without any knowledge of Tajik, and I lived with a host family for several months, and the first few weeks, you don't understand anything. Like, it's just, they're talking to you, and you're just like, not a clue. And after about 2 months or so, you really start understanding words, and you can have conversation. And I just think for me, I started really feeling like, yeah, I'm supposed to be here when I was able to finally have conversations with the women that I was living with in this house and their little girls. Just, yeah, it was like I became part of their family. So I think just having that language really helped a lot.
Great. Some of you maybe answered this question a little bit, but was community and support already there when you arrived, or was that something that you were intentional in creating for yourselves?
We had the privilege when we started off in Mexico City of having a small community there, and then community more significant community popping up around us, and realizing how important that was, especially since we had a very painful exit, which is what can happen, cultural differences and struggle, and we had a really difficult person who we were working with, and so we had a really painful exit from that. So we waited 3 years, and when it was time for us to go back, we've done this before. It's new culture. We're doing French now instead of Spanish. We're doing Africa instead of Latin America. But I knew I needed a community. However, we were going solo without any team on the ground. And so it was I knew that there were expats around, and looking for that community from the beginning was important for us. And so whether you go with a team or don't go with a team, we knew that we had people on the ground culturally that were going to be helping us with all the paperwork, because you have to have someone in country who knows the system, who can help, because whatever it is, if you're staying long term, you've got residential visas, you've got everybody has something that they need you to do, and it's going to take like a year to get through all your paperwork, and that's office visits, and that's knowing when to contact and who to contact. It's just part of the process, whether we were in Mexico or whether we were in Burundi. And so being able to have that, we knew we had those people on the ground, but actually intentionally looking for people who were foreigners that we could connect with also, especially in Burundi, where the differences were pretty paramount between some of the different levels of society. And so we were there to connect with the med students. The med students spoke French, so we learned French, but then there's tribal languages. So because of that, in some of the cultures, there's multiple layers, and being able to connect across layers is such a big deal. It's everything that we are going to do to cross so many was going to be always taken as a hierarchy, and they're not going to ever put themselves on the same, and you can't make that. You can't come in as American and say, we are going to be on the same level, because in America, that's my value, and I want you to be like me. You have to respect the fact that you come into their culture, and there's a way of doing things, and you have to come in under their way of doing things and respect it. And so that's one of the interesting things. So for us, I think we did both the culture or community and not community. And you can find community where you go, but you need to be aware of the situation you're going into and what that looks like.
For Sean and I, we went without a community. The school we were hired into was a brand new school. So we were actually the very first American teachers there. So it was he and I, and then the principal that hired us was from England. So she was like this 65-year-old elderly, well, not super elderly, but lady who hired us, and so the three of us kind of got to be friends, even though she was our principal. But besides that, it was very difficult to find that community, and so we really had to look for it and try to find that community. And as important as it is to be in community and get to know the Native people there, I think it's also crucial and important to be able to have those foreigners or other expats that you can relate to or complain to if you have to, because you can't go to a Native person and complain about their culture. But another expat would understand what you're going through and be going through the same thing. So I would highly recommend, especially if you guys are looking for something, to somehow find a way that you have that community.
Yeah, when I went to Tajikistan, we already had a team on the ground, so your team is kind of like your family, but not really. Different. Yeah, there's different dynamics with a team, but they are an instant community that will help support you. But I also attended an international church, and that to me was like a huge community, a really, really supportive community, and ended up having friends from really all over the world. So that was a fantastic experience, and they were expats, and I could, again, go talk to them about stuff that was going on without having to go to my team all the time or going to a local person. So look for an international church, I would say, if you move abroad.
And for me, it was, for Kelly and I, there was really no support directly in our city. We did have the rest of our team and other expats that were related with our team were all in the city that was about an hour and a half away. So for the first month, we really didn't have support except from the school, and they had a person who was in charge of helping us get around. So that was established through the school, which was nice. But other than that, there was no real community or like a starting point for us.
How did that develop? What did that look like?
Yeah, so the first year, well, the way we started the organization, we were aiming to place teachers. So what happened was the first year we ended up meeting a few other missionaries at the time, just through, because so we're outside of Wuhan. We went to Wuhan, went to church, and again, you network, right? So people, oh my goodness, you're in Huangshu, we didn't know that. We have friends we just met there as well. Here's the number, we should meet up. And so at the first month, we finally met, and then that started the community growth there as you get to know the other expats that are like-minded, as we would say, So as you're growing, your little Christian community here, especially in a communist country where you have to kind of be under the radar, and that's how we do it. So we kind of grew that way.
So for me, the community was pretty much already built in. The school in Canada was just a really small Christian Canadian university, so there's community there whether you want it or not. There weren't people you could avoid seeing during the day, so you learned we're a tight group. And I guess I'm also rather fortunate, I suppose, in Japan. The organization I was with took care of, or they helped to take care of a lot of the visa stuff. So they, it was a lot less stressful for me than I suppose it was probably for the rest of the panel up here. I sat back and let them do most of the work, really. Let's see, actually, I guess probably the hardest, interestingly, was Scotland, because so the St. Andrews University was actually much bigger than St. Stephen's University, where I did my undergrad. So suddenly I'm in this, by my standards, a large place, and I tend to be a rather reclusive person anyway. So it took a while for me to really develop a group of friends. But eventually I did. It was a while though. I'm talking months, a few months. So.
Thank you. Communicating back to your family and friends in the States, what was that easy with our technological advances, or was that challenging for you all as well? Can you give them a picture of what that might have been like?
So I'm a very time-oriented person. Well, I was. And so I would set up, we had internet at our house, kind of. And so I would set up like these Skype dates with my friends or my parents and be like, okay, 6 o'clock my time, 12 o'clock your time or whatever it is. And then, come like 5:30 our time, the power goes out. And it's out until 6. And then I'm like, I was supposed to Skype with this person, and it's 6 o'clock, and they're gonna think that I'm just standing them up, like what am I gonna do? And then it's 6:30 and there's still no power. And so I used to get really anxious about it and really uptight. And so I would tell Sean, like, okay, I'm going down to the internet cafe, and you couldn't Skype or FaceTime there, but I could at least email them. So I would spend all this money like running down to the internet cafe to get on my email, to email them, to apologize that my power was out, so my internet was out, so I couldn't Skype with them, but we would try again tomorrow, that kind of thing. And after about a month of that, it got to the point where I was like, we can set up this date. I might be there, I might not. It's just the flexibility of living where I'm living, and thank you for being understanding. So multiple times, yes, we would set up times like, let's FaceTime, let's Skype, but then the power would go out, or the internet would be out, or any random thing like that. So it was a blessing when the internet worked, and we were very blessed to have internet in our house. When it didn't work, and it was difficult to communicate.
I feel like most of our stories you guys are looking at it and say, oh yeah, those were the good old days, weren't they? But the reality is now everybody's got a cell phone in the whole world, wherever you go.
Up country, Africa.
That's right.
nowhere.
Little village,
Yes.
They don't have electricity maybe, but they've got a cell phone, and they go find somewhere to plug it in. And so you will have access, and they get data on their phones. We're in the ER, in the OR, the operating room with these med students, and they pull out their phone and Google some pathology, and they'll say, here, look, here's a picture of it. And so, that's what's happening all over the world. And so I feel like that question is a good one, but it's not as relevant anymore because you're going to have access to these phones. And you guys are going to take your iPhones with you wherever you go, or whatever phone you carry now. And thankfully, you'll be able to get relatively inexpensive access to the internet wherever you are. It's another topic, but I would recommend setting it down sometimes in these other cultures.
I think the other thing, you'll also have to plan depending on where you go and how sensitive the countries are that you're entering about missions work or whatever you're going to talk about. So you just kind of let your friends and family know ahead of time, hey, please don't say these things and don't communicate this over this because, hey, let's face it, someone's listening online. So it's just one of those things you kind of plan ahead of time and make sure you communicate. But yeah, internet access, no problem with China. I'd say, you start to learn, you learn how you affect your time zone and, oh yeah, I think my mom's up now, I'll give her a call, or whatever it's going to be, and get used to it.
But that's why when the church says, we'd like to set up a live Skype during the service, you're like, no, we record this, there's no way that we're gonna depend on this all coming together and working. And then the second thing is, we were in a country when there was an attempted coup and politically unstable, and fascinating to watch Facebook be shut down in the entire country. And there was another one, was it WhatsApp? Because that's what they use in Africa. So WhatsApp was shut down in the country. It just wouldn't work on anybody's phone. So fascinating, just to kind of be like, oh, really? You do that? Okay. But the internet still worked. So being aware of those kind of things that are part of a world where you don't have the same freedoms you have in the United States.
Yeah, the same thing happened in Uganda. They just shut all social media down.
Yeah, I remember Google had a feud with the Chinese government while we were there, and all of a sudden, all Google was gone, and everything. What just happened? Like, nothing's going on. So.
And it was kind of interesting for us, but then I said to one of the guys, Burundian guys, we were up country, and in Kirundi, I'm trying to say, attempted coup. There was an attempted coup, and he said, Facebook? And I was like, well, I can look on Facebook. And he's like, no, Facebook. And I was like, okay, but this is not where we get our news. Don't you guys have like BBC or Iwachu or something? No, Facebook. And I thought, well, I guess if that's where they get their news, that's why the government shut it down. But you guys know, BBC, like something international, Al Jazeera, something.
Sure.
Now, I will tell you that you can get a VPN.
Yeah, VPN.
And in Tajikistan, they always had Facebook, YouTube, and a variety of other things that were cut off. But if you had a VPN, you could still get access to those.
Yeah.
Do you all have any questions for our panelists?
What's an expat?
Oh, yes, expatriate. Means someone that's a foreigner that's living there too.
Any foreigner living in the country. So it's an easy way to group us all together.
How did you go about finding the organizations that you worked with?
Google.
Help start it. Starting 501c3, and we were the guinea pigs, and we went ahead first, and then started recruit teachers from there.
For me, it was alumni from where I graduated from. They came back and gave a little talk about working abroad, teaching English.
I would advise, we grew up Free Methodist, so it's kind of the natural path that we were on. But I would advise you look around you and say, who am I traveling with these days? Pastor Mark, we've been with Pastor Mark for like 30 years now in Indianapolis, and anyway, but he talks about that for dating as well. You know, who is going the same direction I'm going? These are the people that I probably ought to look at and say, is this a future spouse, or is this somebody I ought to hang out with? But I would say the same thing about organizations. So whatever direction you're headed, if it's sports, if it's sports ministry, if it's teaching English, if it's medicine, whatever, look around you, and there are going to be organizations and people that are really also interested in that same place. And so maybe you've grown up in a certain denomination or group of people, or you have a club or whatever, your parents have a lot of connections. It's that networking thing. So for us, it was a natural one to go with the Free Methodist Church, because if you're going to, especially if you're going to go and raise money, you got to be connected to people, because when they know you and they trust you and believe in what you're doing, then they're going to also support you.
Is it possible to still pay off your student loans if you don't have a like salary job? So I want to be a teacher, and like a lot of teaching jobs that I've like looked into aren't salary. Is it still possible to pay off student loans?
The short answer is yes. You basically have to include that in your budget. If your budget is whatever, however many $1,000, you've got to have that $1,000 school payment in there as well. And so then if people, again, if you cast the vision and God is calling you to do that thing, then they'll include that in what they're, for us in medicine, we have huge debts. I mean, that's the big leagues. And but there are organizations that say, we will help pay your debt as long as you're serving overseas. And so again, depending, I don't know if there may be organizations that help teachers do that. The people, you say, I really want to go do this, and they'll support it. But you've got to kind of roll that in with your other expenses.
How do the language barriers affect your time in the country, and then did you ever have to use an interpreter in certain situations?
Always. Yeah.
It's huge. It affects everything you do. Everything you do. Because no matter how fluent you are, you're not completely fluent. Because there's so many levels of fluency. I would say we're fluent in Spanish and we're not fluent in Spanish. I can have any conversation with anyone in Spanish, but we are not fluent in Spanish. I miss nuances. There's things in the conversation that you don't get because I don't get. It's a whole subjunctive thing. So that is, there's a lot of organizations that will let you go to different places without the language. We will, and we have done that multiple times. Pretty much before we went to Mexico, we did just a small amount of Spanish because we had some, but before we went to Burundi, we didn't do French. Mostly because it's a lot of transitions for the kids. So you're taking the kids, you're taking them to a country, and you're having them be enrolled in a place they don't want to be and learn French for an entire year, then you're taking them out of that place and you're taking them to a new place. And that's a lot of transition. So for us, we said we're not doing that to the kids. But then we landed in a country without a lot of French. We did take French while we were in the country, but It's huge. It is huge. So I would say if you are in a role where you have an organization that's already established on the ground, and they know that you're coming with a little bit of an amount, and they can offset the fact that you're not going to be able to communicate, that's absorbed in, because you've got this glow that comes with you because you're coming from America and you have all this hopefully money that you're helping them out with, and they have vision and they have a plan and they have relationships and they have connection. But if you're going by yourself, or if you're starting your own thing and you're kind of doing your own and you don't have a language, I'm gonna have to really second guess just the thought process there, because it really needs to be, and I'm sure you are connected on the ground with somebody who's gonna be there longer than you are, that really has a bigger plan for this, unless you wanna just come in and do a little sweep and then leave, because it begins and ends with you, and there's a lot that can go wrong in this communication.
So in Japan, it was pretty difficult. So, it's not even Roman characters. It's just, you look at the subway and it's difficult to make any heads or tails out of what you're looking at. But Japan is a fairly westernized culture, and you try to learn as much as you can. Actually, regardless of where you go, if you learn all the polite words, like please, thank you, I'm sorry, you can get miles out of just that. And so I had to learn to be resourceful. So I think when I went to get my first haircut, I took along my passport and showed the barber my picture on the passport and pointed to that in my head, and they got the idea. So and actually, come to think of it, many of the Japanese people that were there just wanted to practice their English on me. So I'm not sure about what this says about how I looked or my state of mind at the time, but it was very frequent for them to come up to me and ask if they could help me, or if I was lost or something. But they wanted to start up these conversations.
I would say it's my suggestion, if you're planning to be in the country long-term, and let's say if you're going for missions, I would highly recommend trying to find an organization that allows you to focus on language almost exclusively, I would say a year. The people I know that had the best language, their organization had them focus on language for 2 years. They weren't allowed to do anything else but language, because it's really hard to do things in the country unless you have that kind of fluency. And if I went again, that's what I would look for. I would say 1 year minimum, and I would prefer to just total language immersion for part of that, but then language lessons so that you really have it down.
Well, before we close, I'd love to, if you all put any final thoughts, final advice, statements you want to share and pass on as these folks are thinking about leaving abroad.
If you're interested, it just keeps going. It's whether it's big or small, you keep looking for opportunities along the way. And if you want to go long term, but you can only do a short term one now, you just keep putting yourself in a position where you can keep looking for opportunities to connect, to be around those people, to be around people who are doing that thing that you're interested in. It will happen if you just keep putting yourself in that spot and talking to the right people and finding out who did you go with and what did that look like and how is that, would you recommend that sending organization? And even if you seriously want to go with a long-term sending organization and maybe short-term, it's not necessarily a bad idea just to go with them for a short-term and to see how it goes. Do you feel like they supported you? We had friends who were in somewhere, I think Honduras, and had teammates who were doing death threats against them. And they received death threats, and the support system said, we think it's just your teammates, he's mad at you, but we're not going to take it seriously because we think it's your teammates, so I think it's just fine. That's not a good support system. That's you don't feel safe at all. They ended up coming home, and she was a long-term missionary kid, but it's who you're going, the sending organization, how supported you feel, because bottom line is, if something happens, In a foreign country, if there's an earthquake, if there's a coup, your mom can't help you. Okay? I don't care how much she loves you, she is not going to know what to do on the other end of the phone. You've got to have a support system who has contingencies in place, who's been through this before, they have connections, they know how to handle this. That is really key. So the support system, the sending organization is a really big part of this. Okay, because they should have their ducks in a row. They should have thought through all this stuff. They should, I mean, we went through contingency planning. If there was something that happened on the ground, how do you get out of it? I mean, we went through orientations. There is lots of things, but these are all components that you're looking for in a group who's going to support you going out, because you need, whether it's financially, what if you're run out of money, what if you have a medical emergency, what if you need to be evacuated, what if there's the airports are shut down. I mean, there's so many things that can happen that the American government cannot help you at all on. You need to make sure you have that point, that person and those people that are right behind you, and you have those ways to contact them and you feel comfortable with that. That's big.
Yeah, and like I said, your organization should help you a lot, and see what they can do to support, and you know, so it's a lot of it's networking, your due diligence ahead of time, taking a look. Okay, is there international insurance involved? You know, is there a consulate nearby? Is there, you know, does the organization have a representative who knows the consulate? You know, so I know we had that set up just so in case there was an emergency, or we had a network of communication within the province. You know, the other thing's patience. Like, you know, sometimes you get so anxious, like I want to go, and this looks great. You know, even once an organization looks great, step back, take a breath, take it over, pray, because you know, once you're in country, it's like, okay, now we're going. You know. But take that moment to be patient, because the right opportunity will come by. You'll find this like, okay, yeah, this is going to be great. You know, this is where the Lord's sending me. I've done my due diligence. I've studied language or whatever I need to do to prep, and now I'm in the right place. You know, because if you try to force it, sometimes you end up. You know, I know some other friends who are just, I'm going to go do it, and they jump and go, and they have a horrible experience because they just dropped in a place, and then. You know, some of these organizations really do try to just use you as free labor for different things, so you just got to be careful of that.
I think just to tie in with that, patience in the country as well is ginormous. If you are not a patient person and you don't have patience,
You'll learn it.
You'll learn it, or I would recommend looking elsewhere, because you cannot go in, like everyone has kind of said, you cannot go in and say, okay, this is how it is, I'm the American, I know the best way, this is what we're gonna do, or else you'll crash and burn. You've gotta go in with complete patience and the willingness to learn and understand their culture.
I'm just going to end by saying, if you're not emotionally healthy here, you're not going to be emotionally healthy there. During my time in Burundi, I counseled people who were these are all missionaries or expats working in the country. So alcoholism, suicide attempts, affairs that were going on. There was a lot of pathology within the expat community because there is a lot of stress. So I'm just saying, making sure that you have, and there are a lot of healthy people too, okay? But I'm just saying, if you're not healthy, if you don't have a good support system, all the stresses that go with international living make it that much more difficult. So making sure that you have those people around you, those resources, and making sure that you're in a good spot before you go is all part of being able to do well internationally.
Actually, I'd say one more thing about like your community of expats and who you'll encounter, because you kind of get an association as well with some of the expats, and you'll find that I don't know if you guys found this to be true. At least in China, like a lot of times when you got hired in, it was pretty easy living, relatively speaking, as far as like, hey, I got pay, I got things covered. And so what we find is a lot of the other expats that weren't there for like missions or Christian work, because they're living an easy life, but oh man, did they do crazy stuff in country, and they were rude, and I mean, we had guys driving motorcycles like crazy, man, up and down the streets, and people would talk about it, and it really sets a bad example. So you got to be careful, you know, what's going on with the expat community as well. It's a really strange place to be when you're kind of like, I shouldn't hang out with those people that I can really speak with and relate with because they're doing some crazy stuff, and I'm gonna go, this way. So, just something to watch out for.
Well,